Let me start admitting people from the lobby. So I'll run the lobby and monitor the lobby, and then help you along, as they say. So admit all.
Cool.
Here we go. Morning, Alan. Morning, Brian.
Morning.
Kevin.
Morning.
Morning, Nigel. Morning, Rick. Morning, Padraig. Morning, Con. Thank you for joining. If you've just joined, if you could mute, please, that'd be excellent, because there's quite a bit of background noise. Thank you. That's probably Henry, actually. Oh no, there we go. We've done that. Nicola, if you could mute as well, that'd be great. Oliver, if you could hold on a sec, Oliver. Yeah, Nicola, if you could mute, please, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Excellent. No, okay, Nicola, I'll mute you. There we are. Boom, done. Excellent. Okay. Morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's Pension Playpen Coffee Morning. Delighted to have so many faces on. Delighted also to have Oliver Lane presenting, who's founder, I guess, of Behind Login. I'll leave it up to Henry and myself to run the session, and we'll introduce Oliver in a second. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Usual format. We are being recorded, so Nigel, Rick, Brian, everybody, thumbs up that you're happy to be recorded. Con, good, great, thank you very much. So we're being recorded. If you would like to ask a question or make a point at any time, please raise a hand, and I'm sure Oliver will be delighted to answer your questions. And this session is being recorded, and obviously we'll post this afternoon on our website. And we also now have a function for podcasts. So Pension Playpen will create a podcast from this as well. So when you're in the gym, when you're in the gym running and cycling, you can listen to Oliver on your podcast. So there you go. Without any further ado, I will pass you on to Oliver, who will introduce himself and what today's all about. So Oliver, over to you.
Thanks, Steve, and I'll try and make it as energy filled as possible to keep you up to speed on that running machine. So yeah, I mean, I'll briefly just to introduce myself. So I'm Ollie. I run Behind Login. We're a competitor research and sort of market intelligence agency, all built on challenges that myself and the team have had working within financial services, working within pensions, banking, investing, that sort of world, where competitor research and sort of market intelligence can be a particular struggle. So my career started in mobile app agencies. So I used to build apps for various companies across various industries. And then I went to HL Hargreaves down in Bristol, which is where we're based now, and led their mobile app team for a few years, building out the features and functionality on the mobile app, making it the easiest place to manage your SIP and your workplace pension and all that good stuff. And during that role, one of the real challenges that we always had was understanding our competitive landscape. So what are AJ Bell doing on their app or website? What are Vanguard doing? All around the sort of user experience, thinking about, okay, what's happening overseas? What can we learn from the likes of Robinhood or Fidelity in the US? What's happening in sort of South America? And just trying to understand that competitive landscape was always a real struggle, because it typically meant you'd have to be a domicile of that particular country to access their app or their website to create an account. And then even when you had that, it meant using your own money to create an account, getting credit checked, you know, the FCA policies around PA dealing, personal account dealing, all these restrictions and challenges and barriers of doing good competitor and market research around user experience and sort of how apps and websites are being designed. So that was the kind of catalyst for what is now Behind Login. And about 3 years ago, we launched a proposition to help people in the financial services world understand their competitors' apps and websites. And primarily we do that in kind of 3 key ways. So firstly, we've built a research panel. So general consumers and users of the different financial services tools and platforms globally. So if you've got your general investing account with AJ Bell, if you've got your SIP with Aviva, if you've got your banking platform with, you know, NatWest or whatever, you can be on our panel and you'll join a call with one of our researchers, very much like this. And there's a screen share function where you can basically share a screen and talk through the features and functionality of an app or website. We record that information, analyze it, and then effectively package it up and sell it. So we get this real view of like how different products and experiences are being met by the market. And then to complement it, and I guess this is sort of part of the reason we're talking today, is that, you know, you do all this great research and you get this snapshot in time. You know, you see what's happening in the world right now, but the rate of innovation in the market means that products are constantly being updated and experiences are constantly being improved. So it's really difficult to keep up to date with how the market's moving. So that was kind of the second door that opened for us at Behind Login, and we built some tech which basically tracks how different products and services are updating. And the way that we do that is basically tracking the communication channels of different organizations. So let's say Scottish Widows have got a Twitter handle, they've got Facebook, they've got a LinkedIn, they've got App Store release notes that they produce every time they release an app update. They've got press releases, they've got blog posts, they've got podcasts, whatever. We track all those comms channels that companies use to communicate with the market, and then we analyze them to pick out what's a product update, what's a service update, what's a feature, a new feature, journey optimizations, etc., etc. And then we use AI to analyze it and say, okay, well, what are the themes that are emerging within this? What's interesting? What's happening? And right now we use that to produce what we're going to talk through today, which is effectively, it's called Radar. It's like a radar scan of the market. And here we've done a H1, so half year 2024 look back on what's happened across the pension landscape. So yeah, we've got the rest of the session to talk about that. Steve and I chatted earlier, but we very much want it to be conversational. Like for me, this is an opportunity to get some feedback, like, is it actually any good? Does it resonate with you? And then also sort of pick it apart, have a chat about it. And then we follow on with some sort of future predictions. So where do we see the pensions market moving in the future? And yeah, I don't portray myself as a pension expert. I'm sure everyone on this call is a lot more foray with pensions than I am, but like we're user experience experts within financial services. So we know what good apps and websites look like. And then it'd be great to hear from you guys on what that means, like for a more granular perspective in the pensions world. So without further ado, I'll share my screen. We can all see that. Oh, allow. Yeah.
Yep, all
wonderful. Good. Cool. So yeah, bit about Behind Login, which we've just done. Then we'll go through some report highlights and then talk about the predictions for the future. My screen's now full screen, so I can't actually see any hands up, but I trust Steve will jump in if we get any. So yeah, we've got our research panel, we've got our research methodology, we've got our competitor tracking capabilities. This is the Radar platform that I just touched on, all the channels we track to analyze updates. And this report looked at 10 leading UK pension providers. So PensionBee, L&G, Aviva, Scottish Widows, Royal London, Smart Pension, Penfold, Standard Life, Aegon, and Cushion. And I guess just a sort of natural question point there, like these are what we observed as 10 leading pension providers, perhaps influenced somewhat by our client base who are particularly interested in these players. But is there anyone that we feel is missing from this list? And sorry, just to jump back, it's like our technology, you have to input. So we've got to say, analyze these X providers. So there's a bit of manual interaction there to assess these 10 providers. And I guess it's what we know and observed as the 10 leading pension providers. But is there anyone missing or anyone that's a bit?
We've got a hand raised by Padraig and a comment by Alan, but the biggest one is Nest. But Padraig, do you want to unmute and ask a question or make your point?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Look, Ollie, I've got a problem with the word leading. It's a bullshit marketing term, means nothing. Could you put some context in it for me? Does that just mean these are 10 of the companies that have made the most noise over the period that you've tracked them? Because if it's, I mean, AJ Bell is one that's missing, and also Nest should be there too. But can you just clarify what you mean by leading?
Well, I guess it's 10 of the biggest, perhaps, or the.
Well, it's not biggest either. So some of them are the biggest, yeah, but that's not it either, as far as I can see from that list.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe it is a bullshit term. Fair challenge. And I think that's what I was just touching on. Is like, we picked these providers. Perhaps leading is the wrong word, but there's a manual effort to go and pick out these providers, and we'll run our tech against
certainly all
it.
made a lot of noise in the last couple of years, no doubt. So if it's because they're prominent on the searches, that makes sense. I just wanted to understand where that list had been compiled, or what the basis of it's been compiled. Thank you.
Yeah, Oliver, I think leading is misleading, maybe to a lot of us on this call, I guess. So anyway, yeah. but it's putting meat on this scenario. Yeah, Nest is their interactive investor, AJ Bell, so some people on this call are very much in the occupational pension side and some are on the advisory side, IFA side. So there are some significant ones missing, People's Partnership, WTW, Willis Towers Watson, Brian, thank you, Aon, yeah, okay. So we've got to be careful here on the 10 leading, but there's a lot of providers out there that aren't on this list that are probably bigger than PensionBee, bigger than Penfold, etc., etc. So, but anyway, sorry to interrupt, Oliver. Over to you. Sorry.
No, that's super helpful. And again, just touch on like this is a learning experience for us. Like we're building this. This is a fairly new like product in the market. So yeah, absolutely good thing to call out. And just I guess the reflection for me is like, yeah, Mercer, another one good. Is what we could do perhaps in future instead of like picking 10 and then just running with those. Actually, if we have deployed the technology across all of them and then picked out the top 10, market movers, who's sort of making the most noise, and then reflect on those, that might have been a better approach. So every day is a school day. And then so across those 10 providers, we look at basically 4 key categories. So firstly, new services. So something that effectively enhances the business's proposition and requires like multiple teams or partnerships to sort of bring it to life and deliver it. So for example, in this report, we observed that Aegon launches a continual professional development hub for advisors to address ongoing regulatory changes. That's something that's like requiring new teams and content to produce, manage. So that's a new service. Then you've got new features. So it's like typically an app or website-led change driven by customer or business demand. So in this report, we pulled out that PensionBee launched a pension statistics dashboard on the app and website. Then we've got service updates. So these are generally like optimizations and improvements to make a service better. And then the same with feature updates, just general improvements to an existing set or existing service. So they're the kind of 4 categories of change that we've observed. And again, like another natural question point, like, are there any categories missing? Anything that sort of, really tickles or is particularly interesting to you as you look at this or think about the sort of evolving, innovating pension landscape? So user reviews, Kevin, surely that's all that matters. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. So there is an element of this which looks at, okay, so it's like the so what, like, okay, cool, all the bells and whistles, you release all this cool new stuff, but actually, like, who cares? So yeah, user reviews is a big thing, and we're evolving. Again, this is like Radar. It's early days in its sort of conception, but if we can track, how a thing has been adopted over time, how the users interact and review it, then yeah, that would effectively validate or prove that a new service or a new feature is actually any good. Yeah, so Brian said about better planning tools. So yeah, better planning tools would probably come under this new features or new, well, yeah, it depends how sort of granular those features are, but effectively it's a new feature. So what we've done is like taken all these comms across these 10 organizations, every single piece of communication they've released to the market, then we filter out a lot of that noise. So it might be like, we got dog in the office day or good luck in the Olympics, whatever. We don't really care about any of that stuff. It's like, is this thing, moving the dial on new services, new features, etc. So yeah, so pension modeling and things like that would come under new features typically within this. So that is all captured. Yeah, no other comments. So then the innovation leaderboard. So I guess this is an interesting one. So the innovation leaderboard effectively looks at how many changes each provider across those 10 providers has made in the last 6 months, well, from H1 2024, and then gives you a bit of a leaderboard. And absolutely, this shouldn't be taken as gospel in terms of who's the most innovative. But what it does do is give a little flavor, a little taste of who is the sort of the most willing and has the biggest appetite for change. and it reflects that sort of organization's ability to innovate, and the appetite. So yeah, perhaps not surprising, at the top of the list there is PensionBee. L&G also coming in quite high, which I thought was quite interesting, and then you can see that sort of ranking list. So 42 updates across the market, 16 new services, 6 new features, 9 service updates, and 11 feature updates. Yeah, I mean, how does that resonate? Does that feel high? Does that, how does that feel to everyone?
Alan, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, it's an observation, really, answer your question, really, Oliver. In that, so I've got pensions with 5 of those, and those updates seem quite high to me because, as I say, I've got pensions with 5 of them. I follow pensions quite a lot. I look at stuff on there, and none of them have told me about their updates.
Yeah,
But also make the
interesting. And
observation that actually it's within each organisation, there's probably lots and lots of different flavours of pensions. So Scottish Widows is, I'm going to call out as one example, because they've won lots of things recently for their innovation about Mirror and their app and all that kind of stuff. But my Scottish Widows pension isn't even on the app. So they have an app, but I can't use it. And I suspect, so you don't know whether, I don't know whether I'm in 5% of their client base or 50% of their client base.
Yeah, very
Oliver,
interesting.
The other point, of course, is that Legal & General have got a master trust and contract-based. So has Aviva, so
Yeah.
has Scottish Widows. So is this, so is Standard Life, so is Aegon, and so is Cushion. So is some of this split between contract-based and master trust? And sometimes, are these systems all on the same platform or on different platforms? Or that's got to be a bit clearer, I think, for the market and the industry.
Yeah, so this isn't broken down by that effectively. When you get into the weeds of the report, which I can share with everyone afterwards, that gives you by provider a bit more of a granular breakdown by the particular update that they've made. This is just sort of high level across that particular organization. So yeah, but again, a fair challenge. And I think that's where like the nuance of pensions comes in, because we did this report for like banking, B2C, D2C consumer banking, and there's not that much nuance within it. So yeah, really interesting observation for this, and perhaps we could have like refined it further. Again, like the way that this works is we look at, let's say, PensionBee, like we'll track their app updates, their website updates, their comms to the market, press releases, blog posts, content and podcasts, etc., and then pick out the general updates within that. But they're not as granular as which particular type of pension this applies to or anything. So yeah, and again, it's interesting how these organizations are releasing things and then perhaps not communicating them to consumers. So like, we track all those channels, and you don't skip a beat, effectively to kind of capture this information. But a lot of a lot of consumers might just miss, it might be like one tweet in a month ago, which you very well likely could have missed. So there's that second piece, and it sort of touches on what we were talking about earlier in terms of user reviews. So ultimately it was all about, is this moving the dial in terms of how consumers perceive a brand, how good it's doing at meeting consumer needs, and if all those updates aren't actually doing anything, then are they valuable at all? So yeah, really interesting.
Oliver, the other point I think that Alan's made in the chat is, how wide and varied does this go? Because obviously, yes, Nest is emitted, NOW's emitted, People's Pensions is emitted, but also in the UK, you've got a really huge DB market, final salary market, with people like the NHS and local government and teachers. And then you've got big schemes, including USS and BT, for example, which is mentioned. Where does this start and where does this stop, and what actually are you trying to achieve? I think is what Alan's point is trying to make.
So what we're trying to do is basically give a view of how innovative, or how the pensions landscape and market is moving, what new features and functionality are being released across those apps and websites, to basically give the rest of the organizations on this list a bit of a litmus test in terms of how well they are meeting, how innovative they are in the market in terms of meeting evolving consumer needs, in terms of updates against their competitive landscape. And that helps organizations to sort of build business cases. You know, if you're at, let's say, Standard Life, and you can say, look, our top 8, you know, we're like 8th on the list in terms of how innovative we are in the market. We need to invest more into digital transformation, etc. So it's giving people that sort of that view of the world. And then for those individual teams, if you want to dive into that and understand at a granular level how, you know, what these particular changes are, what schemes they refer to, etc., then there's the opportunity to do that further. But this, particularly for this presentation as well, this is just like a high level snapshot of what's going on in the market, with the opportunity to dive further into it thereafter.
Sorry to ask another question, Oliver, and I know lots of people probably will want to make similar points, but again, why is the total, presumably you're ranking this on total number of updates, but you know, some of those updates might be really irrelevant or really small. Does that make PensionBee the best because they've got 13 updates? You know, Aviva could be the best because they've got 6, but all 6 are absolutely fantastic and amazing and client facing and tick loads of boxes, whereas, you know, only 2 of PensionBees do the same. Do you see where I'm coming from? How do you rank these? You know, so
yeah.
And there's lots of actuaries on this call as well. They say, well, you know, what's what's the weighting on these things? You know, so yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, fair challenge. And I guess that's why we've got those sort of latter columns there in terms of new services, new features versus just sort of general updates. So yeah, but it is a fair question. And I guess this is like a snapshot view. You know, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, right? And this is one of them, which looks at how many updates has this organization made. And it goes back to that point I made where it's like, it's not necessarily like a direct indicator of success, but it reflects an organization's ability and appetite to innovate and change. So yeah, and in theory, you know, you get the full report and you can dive into those changes in a bit more detail and make your own assumptions, make your own analysis of each particular thing. But yeah, again, fair challenges all round.
David's made a point. David, do you want to unmute David Henderson and just ask your question about the H2 report? Do you want to ask that question?
I can unmute. I'm in a cafe, so there's a bit of background noise, but yeah, really useful, some good feedback. And based on that, Ollie, for the H2 reports, will you be able to go a bit more granular in some of that, some of those scorings, in terms of who you're looking at to give it a bit more specific detail? So maybe looking specifically at providers or other.
Well, yes, I guess the H2 report, next report. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was touching on earlier, right? Like this is our, this is one of the first few reports we've done across the market. This is the first pension report, and yeah, let's take all that feedback on board. I've been jostling down notes rigorously, so all that will play into what we what we produce in the next report. Because effectively, I keep touching on it, but like we get all these comms, and it's up to us how we analyze it. So if actually there's loads more granularity that's needed, if actually the 10 leading, the BS leading word, whatever, you know, isn't the right number, perhaps there's 15, or perhaps you want to be more focused, or perhaps you want to split it by DB, by big scheme, by SIP, whatever. Like, let's do that, and let's make sure that this is a super tailored report and that's actually adding value and relevance for its readers. So yeah, all good feedback that will play.
Oliver, just I don't know, John, whether you want to ask your question, but it's a really good question, John Mather, because a lot of these providers, everybody's caught by consumer duty. But John, do you want to ask a question about the scoring?
Well, I just wondered whatever happened to the age wage score, and could that be incorporated in here? Because that was innovative, but I've not seen much evidence of it lately. And we should be measuring surely performance in some way, and we're in the distribution of performance somebody's fund lies, and they can take corrective action if necessary.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the age wage score personally.
Well, Henry's a man, but he's probably on otherwise engaged. But But basically, you know, it's all to do with value for money testing versus performance. Again, you know, we've got a load of talent on this call today. What's important to the providers who then want to value how they perform, not only value for money tests, but also performance, John, isn't it? That's another column that could be added, I guess. Is it what in an ideal world, John? What would you want then?
I want to be able to focus the client's mind on excess returns over inflation and where they stood in the marketplace and whether they needed to, whether we as financial advisors should keep that job or they should find somebody better. You know, that's what they want to know, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, John.
Yeah.
I'm going to play devil's advocate though, John. I'm going to say if that looks really good, and they're going to pat you on the back and say, John, you're an amazing advisor. But if you're bottom, you know, quarter on performance, they're going to say, John, what's happened?
Yeah, no, but you should be able to face criticism like that and justify it. And if you're not good enough, you need to improve yourself. We're never always at the top of the tree, but you know we shouldn't get too complacent because we've had a good run for a while. We should. Isn't that innovation? Isn't that where it comes in? That's where it matters in the performance you're getting.
Yep. And again, I don't
Yeah.
know, Oliver, your background. You said you weren't a pensions expert. Is performance on your radar for the next report, or not? And value for money? I don't know.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't necessarily. I guess we're focused around providing like digital teams that are responsible for improving the app or the website for consumers. Like they don't necessarily have any control over the funds that go into the scheme or whatever. But it is an interesting observation, and I think that. So we recently did some work with a company that's helped build an investment calculator. It's called Investing Insiders, and you basically punch in, okay, my SIP's worth this, and my ISA's worth that, and this is who it's currently with, and this is my allocation of stocks across these markets, these asset types, etc. And then it spits out saying, yeah, cool, you should change your current provider from X to Y, or here's 3 best providers for you. But actually, in the research that we did, which is basically looking at how consumers use it and how they're going to engage with that, one of the huge contributors to a deciding factor is the quality or the user experience. So how easy is it to go in and check performance? How easy it's going to buy and trade and sell and all this sort of stuff. So, again, it's a slightly different industry or slightly different nuance of the market. But ultimately, yeah, performance is one thing. But if that performance means, you only get a letter every year and you have to wait for half an hour on hold to get in touch with your provider, that's not good enough for a lot of consumers nowadays. Digital experience, such an important thing for the evolve, gives a sort of guide and nuance. And I guess there are multiple lenses. You need the whole thing to build up a proper view of the market. But yeah, I think performance is one thing which could come in nicely with this. But yeah, there's various other things now that are important to people.
Can I ask another question, Oliver? Sorry, I keep asking lots of questions. I mean, this is obviously digital and functionality and everything else. And you said some of this is driven by consumers as well. But what about things like Trustpilot scores? Is that something you should or have considered?
Yeah, so someone touched on it earlier as well, like ultimately what do users think of this? What are the user reviews? So yeah, absolutely. It's on our roadmap. So App Store ratings and reviews, Trustpilot scores. We also, independently of this, we use our research panel to run regular surveys, which understand, user sentiment and feedback around different providers. So interweaving all of that sort of stuff into this is in theory on the roadmap for the future. Yeah.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, can we move on, Oliver? Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Just making a couple notes. So 3 key themes that we observed. So one is around customer-centric enhancements. So again, it's what I sort of touched on to John's point around, it's a customer-driven report focused on how consumers engage with brands and with technology. And what we observed is that providers implemented 10 features that all focused on that user experience piece. So PensionBee's new pension statistics dashboard, and a retirement planner to include non-PensionBee pots, and various other observed is that customer-centric enhancements is the main reason for making all these updates. So yeah, going back to that point around like user reviews and things, it'd be amazing if we could have that view to say, all right, cool, well, PensionBee have just released this pension statistics dashboard, but actually, does anyone give a shit? Let's track that. So yeah, key theme, customer-centric enhancements there. Second one is probably not unfamiliar, but regulatory and compliance enhancements. So the Aegon example there around continual professional development hub for advisors, just to keep advisors up to date with the evolving market. And L&G also focusing on that advisor updates to deal with the regulatory compliance changes there. And the last one I thought was quite interesting, and it's probably a nuance, but a focus on financial inclusion. So Smart Pension released a couple of niche products around halal compliant investments, and then a bunch of the other sort of smaller incremental things there around meeting the needs of diverse consumers. Yeah, which I thought was pretty cool one. I wasn't necessarily, when you go into these things, you can probably predict a few of the key themes that are going to emerge, but that in financial inclusion one was a bit of a standout one for me. So yeah, again, good opportunity for questions there or feedback, like how do those key themes emerge? Are there any that are sort of that we feel are missing from this in terms of the propositional and product updates that these providers are making at the moment?
Brian, do you want to unmute and ask your point? You made a point in the chat, Brian, about maps. Do you want to make your point there?
I work for the Money and Pension Service, Oliver. So we sort of get literally tens and tens of thousands of people calling our helpline. And quite a lot of what we do is just sort of technical and stuff like that. But there's also increasingly a lot more about helping people think about their future, helping them understand how pensions work. And although we can have genuine conversations with them, a lot of the people who've got pensions say, well, there's no real, and it may just be anecdotal, I appreciate, but they sort of say, there's not really any way of planning easily on an app, how much do I need to pay into a pension? How do I work out what I need when I retire? How do I understand what risk means? And how do I understand once I've worked it out, how to take it? So just general feedback. When we say, have you been on your, because we have to be impartial, you see, so we can't recommend commercial websites or things like that, but a general principle seems to be, thanks Kevin, the general principle seems to be that a lot of the apps are not very sophisticated. There's not a lot of education, there's not a lot of actual tools that are usable for the average customer. So that's the sort of thing I would like to see innovations to make it easier for someone to do this without having to use a financial advisor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree, Brian. It's a theme that we've observed in our research as well. And there, from what we've observed, there is innovation happening in this space. PensionBee can be considered a bit of a golden child, but their educational features, for example, are great compared to what we've looked at elsewhere. So particularly, it's an interesting point. It's quite granular, but like ultimately, there's lots of different ways that different people consume educational content. Some people are visual learners, so they like quizzes and graphs and all that sort of stuff that they can use to visualize performance over time and understand how their contributions work for them, etc. Some people are, I don't know what the phrase is, but like auditory learners, so they like listening to podcasts. Some people like reading long form articles, etc. So there's lots of different ways that different consumers educate themselves, and PensionBee are doing a really good job of providing all those sort of different points to meet those needs. And they are swaves ahead of anything else we saw in the market when we did some research. This is sort of separate to this report, but yeah, in terms of what we've seen in the market.
I mean, we're sort of very supportive of financial advisors, and we don't recommend individual advisors, but we do very often suggest this would help you if you got financial advice. This is the sort of thing that isn't really specific to one pension. Go and get advice. But equally, there are a lot of people who are perfectly capable of self-serving if only the tools were there to let them do it.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So it's finding those tools and then accessing them and then using them in a way that's suitable to different consumer types is very important. And there tends to be a bit of a trend towards financial education or pensions education assuming a level of knowledge already.
Yes.
Whereas, some of the people that you're speaking to perhaps and generally the actual knowledge levels are quite significantly lower than perhaps is what perceived by advisors or other organizations. So it feels to me like there needs to be a baseline level of knowledge to access these things, which some people don't have, and then that creates anxiety. It means you're trying to learn something that you have no foundational understanding about.
Sure.
We've got a hand raised. Thank you, Brian. We've got a hand raised by John, and then we might come to Kevin Hollister as well, who probably have a few things to say. But John, do you want to go first?
Yeah, just to Brian's point, which is a very valid one. I think if you could bridge this education gap, if MAPS would produce an agenda to take to the IFAs for the guy to ask intelligent questions, I mean, that would help a lot. And most IFAs will give a free first interview or time, and it's underestimated how much advisors do give on a free basis. But writing that agenda out for the poorly educated would take them massively forward very quickly at low cost and would not waste the good advice that MAPS gives.
We do actually, John, sorry to come back, a really good point. And on our website, we do, probably aware, we have like a retirement advisor directory, which is where financial advisors can volunteer to be on our directory. We just check that they're regulated, that they can give individual advice and they can recommend a wide range of products, and then they're on. But also, a little bit further on in the website, there are sort of questions to ask a financial advisor, how to decide, what sort of things you should look for in a financial advisor. But yeah, there's only so much we can do. And when we have conversations with people, we do often get questions: how do I choose an advisor? What sort of things do they do? And we explain what advisors do. But yeah, so I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, John, thanks. Kevin, do you want to say a few words about sort of signposting and guidance and everything else? Do you want to unmute, Kevin?
Hi, Steve. Thanks. I suppose one of the points, if you're looking at innovation, I mean, it's clear that there's got to be a differential between innovation in the accumulation market and decumulation. Quite rightly focused on a lot of innovation that PensionBee do, and it's really, really good. They've got fantastic UX and so forth, and they get great consumer reviews, which at the end of the day, to me, is the only thing that matters, what people who actually use their products think, or use products of any provider. But there is a marked difference between accumulation and decumulation. I suppose in being an actuary, I'd probably say accumulation is easy, decumulation is much, much harder. And the amount of innovation in that decumulation space of, now I've built up all my money, and not just the money in the pension pot, what else I've got, my state pension, my old DB scheme, my ISAs, everything I'm going to put towards retirement. How are you going to actually use that to provide you with an income for the rest of your life, which I suppose is the ultimate goal of pensions, in the first place, to provide people with that. And it's a big psychological change as well for people of, I'm building up money, I'm working, I'm building that up to the point of, right, now I've actually got to start living off that money. And the question or the answer that we get, or that people really focus on, is just, will I have enough money to last, and will I be able to get the income that I need in retirement? So so I think if you're going to look at innovation and whatever else, it would definitely be good to split it between accumulation and decumulation. I think there's lots and lots of innovation in the accumulation space, very little in the decumulation space so far.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, and it's also like our organizations particularly incentivized to help with, people withdrawing down their money. Ultimately, it's like making basis points on the accumulation phase is obviously commercially viable, but helping out the decumulation doesn't necessarily give people that much of an opportunity. But it's a very interesting shout. Yeah, certainly.
We've got a hand raised by Peter. Peter, do you want to unmute and ask a question or make your point?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. just occurs to me that we're actually talking here about innovation and all these things and consumers' access to products. The problem with pensions is we're dealing with a very long time scale, both in the accumulation and the deaccumulation field. Looking at it as a consumer product, we tend to, there would be a temptation as an individual to say, oh, well, I like pension B, I'll have it this month. Next month, oh, I'll have legal and general because that looks better. And yes, I'll draw part of my pension now from that and I'll leave the rest and draw it later. We haven't got the capacity to provide that sort of thing within the industry at the moment. And I think perhaps we are focusing on the wrong interface, if you like. Whether you're using an IFA or doing it yourself is largely irrelevant because the consumer himself doesn't understand the fundamental nature of the pension product, and I think there is a temptation to market something that is attractive from a marketing point of view that is not functional for the member. So that's my point.
Yeah, fair point.
Okay, Oliver. Just looking at David, you made a point about Monzo. Is that a good news story, David? Is that why you've posted it, or?
Yeah, just having looked at their sort of user journey onboarding last week, it seems quite tailored for their market and their clients sort of size and demographic. It's a different style, very easy to engage with. As I said, it's kind of like the Instagram stories, which is obviously tailored to their age range. I'm just wondering what Ollie's thoughts on that are. Is that something he's looked at? And does he think that they'll help challenge and push forward the user experience in pension space as they have in banking?
That's an interesting point, actually, Oliver. Sorry, go on. You go, Oliver, first. Yeah, go
on. I think it's a great example of innovation, and it's taking what can be or is traditionally like not particularly exciting or sexy experience and applying that Monzo, that UX focus, that lens on top of it to make it slick and quick and simple and easy. And for me, I actually think it's a bit of a game changer. You know, it's in the SIP world now, but I think they have plans to expand beyond that. And it just takes that fundamental customer-centric focus of digital banks and sort of modern financial services propositions, then applies it to pensions. So yeah, for me, it's a game changer, and it will push not only drive consumer adoption of that particular product, but hopefully it will set a bit of a benchmark for what good user experience looks like within financial services. And some of these providers that we've got on this list here and the others that we've spoken about will see it and a sort of chance to pull the socks up and meet the same level of sort of user experience and customer quality that Monzo is providing.
Do you think that the power of the banks then entering the market, I mean, obviously Cushion NatWest is another example. Do we think that actually they're going to use all their expertise on the banking side into the pensions industry, and if the pension providers don't wake up, they're going to be left behind? Do you think that's going to happen?
I personally do, yeah. I think that is a serious risk. There's probably like a load of nuance and underlying reasons as to why that perhaps won't happen. But if we look at it through that digital lens and ultimately the consumer lens, which is the driver of business growth, then yes, I do think that. And I think particularly if you look at the current wealth holders of our generation who are, didn't grow up with mobile apps, they're willing to accept a pretty shoddy user experience because they've been with their pension provider for 20 years and they've only got another 5 to go before they go into decumulation. Whereas the wealth generators now are the 20, 30, 40-year-olds, and they have come to expect a quality of digital experience like those of Monzo, of Starling, of Revolut, of some of the big banks now. So yeah, if pension providers don't wake up, they're very unlikely to be able to meet the needs of consumers that are changing now and becoming those wealth creators.
Yeah, the scary thing is, a friend of mine recently opened up a Chase app or Chase Bank account, and he said it took him about 10 to 15 minutes. And at the end of the process, he'd gone through all the money laundering stuff. At the end of the process, in 15 minutes, he had a sort code and account number.
Yeah,
with a Chase
and
app.
probably had Yeah, and then have the card in the post the next day.
There you go. So that's presumably what the pension provider's got to start competing with. If that tech is there, which I think it is, if that starts entering the pensions community, then you can open up a pension within minutes, and away you go. So, and then that comes to another source, which is regulation. Are we over-regulated or too regulated? But your thoughts, Oliver?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and actually draws me nicely on to the 4 predictions for the future. So let's talk through this, and I'll come back to your question there, Steve, in a minute. So for me, there's kind of 4 key observations, which I guess are bit of inherent knowledge and understanding of the kind of landscape of user experience and digital products within the financial services world, plus some of the lessons and learnings from previous pension research and the H1 look back of innovation across the market. But really, we're going to see a continued accelerated rate of innovation driven by digital transformation. So between 2018 and 2023, there was £22 billion invested into digital transformation initiatives within the pensions landscape in the UK. And that is now sort of coming to fruition. There's a shit ton of money, right, that people have spent to improve underlying services and systems, which basically means the rate of innovation can be accelerated. So 10 years ago, there were all these legacy systems, tech stacks that have been built on outdated technologies with code bases where there was only one developer left in the world that could actually understand the business logic and make a change. There's been a huge amount of investment into that space, which is the sort of the foundations of the platform. But now that is sort of starting to become realized. So I think in future radar reports, H2 and beyond, for example, we will see those number of changes and those rates of innovation accelerating. And I think that'll mean that not only do the pension bees, which haven't got those legacy technology stack problems, we'll see those continue to innovate. We'll actually see some of the bigger players, some of the more traditional providers, now being able to kind of pull their weight and innovate at the rate of some of the more modern players. So whilst I think it is a concern and a risk that the Monzos and people like that are going to come in and sort of nibble at market share and nibble at heels, the powerhouses with the big assets under management, the big organizations that have adopted or that have invested in digital transformation historically will now be able to sort of start to accelerate that innovation. So that's sort of prediction 1 for the future.
Okay, interesting.
The second one is basically everything we've just spoken about, a continued focus on customer-centric enhancements. So yeah, the likes of Monzo entering the market and pension providers having to now compare themselves against those and worry about those digital first, those customer-centric first organizations. I think that will basically put the pressure under digital teams, digital leaders within these large organizations to level up effectively and focus really on customer centricity to improve those enhancements. If you think about the board of these traditional pension providers now, they are now seeing and comparing themselves against these digital banking providers. So I think there'll be more rigorous investment into this side of the market, and that will basically come with a more customer centric focus enhancements. So yeah, traditional providers are starting to look up. So I think this will be a big change. Those innovations that we've observed in H1 will continue to thrive. There'll be more customer focused things, more UX focused things, ultimately improving the app and the website. The third one is, I guess, not well known. It is well known, which is around a focus on regulation and compliance. So, we all know the regulations that are coming through, them far better than I do, but ultimately there needs to be resources allocated to keep up to date with these. Kind of to Steve's point a minute ago, are we an over-regulated country? And ultimately resources need to be in place to meet those regulations. So things like the pension dashboard, meeting consumer duty needs, all that sort of stuff. Perhaps not a continued prediction for the future, but just a continued effort for organizations now. And then the last one great picture. I'm not sure if anyone caught the 100 meters on Sunday, but this is sort of everyone finishing at exactly the same time within a very short period of time. But this, for me, really nicely summarizes this last prediction, that increased competition is basically going to create a level playing field in terms of smaller organizations. You know, we had Tenfold on that list who just hit 250 million AUM in 4 years. You know, Pension B's 5.2 billion AUM. The competition is going to increase. The ability for organizations to invest in technology to meet consumer needs, the perceptions of consumers and what consumers nowadays find important, is just going to create that level playing field a bit more, and increased competition and shifting leaderboards will be a great example of, you know, of what's going to happen in the world as we the pension world as we know it now.
So Oliver,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt. What's your customer going to be? You know, in 6 months, 12 months time, if you could wave a magic wand, who are your customers? Are they only providers, or are they tech companies and banks, or are they consumers, or where does your business model go? What's the next 6 to 12 months look like?
Well, so it's effectively working with providers. So we already work with half of those people on that list that we spoke through, and we just continue to continually evolve and meet that. So pensions is only one small slice of the financial services world in which we operate. We also work with sort of banks, insurers, trading platforms, investment platforms, etc. And ultimately, it's a B2B organization, right? But we just want to give people the insights they need to understand how they stack up against the competition, both from what is your user experience right now, what can you learn and what can you improve, as well as how is the market evolving and how can you keep up to date with that fast moving landscape and increasing competition. So I think it's just more of the same from a behind login perspective, working with providers across the market.
Okay, interesting. Alan, do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to ask it about percentage of users? Do you want to ask it, Alan?
I'll ask. Yeah, I'm just curious whether you had any stats on sort of usage. One of my views of the pensions stuff is hardly anybody uses it anyway, and it's actually it's very hard just to log in, let alone use anything within it. And I wonder whether, feeding into predictions for the future, how many finance apps are people actually going to use? Are pensions already lost if they're way behind the banks who have better tech and much better adoption already?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Alan. We actually did a study recently. So there's a bit of a trend. So in the East, the concept of mega apps, where you can have your entire life in one mobile app across, you can order your taxi, pay your bills, do your banking all within one mobile app. We did a study on how those apps are perceived by Western consumers, particularly UK consumers. Because what we noticed is that the likes of Monzo, for example, you can now have your entire digital, your entire financial lives within those mobile apps. Revolut are going a very similar way. So we did a study to see if the idea of all your sort of eggs in one basket would resonate with UK consumers, and the resounding answer was no. If you think back to the 2007, 2008 financial crisis, where lots of people lost a lot of money. And there's a bit of a perception now that people, don't want to keep all their eggs in one basket. So I think those pockets or those slices of keeping your financial life separate currently resonates with UK consumers. So I think that whilst there's going to be hot competition for particularly the pensions market, doesn't necessarily mean that they're blown out of the water and unable to come back from it, because I think it sort of lends itself to that idea that people want to have separate pots for separate things in the UK.
Okay, thanks for that. Mike, you got your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I thought it's a great question around adoption, so I can provide a bit of provider perspective on that, sitting on the workplace business at Legal & General. So On that adoption point, we invested in digital services for our drawdown customers, and what we found is actually it's a tiny number of customers, so less than 1% of our customers, but actually against some expectation, really high adoption. So we put these services live, and we found 85% of these customers who are in retirement wanted to use the digital services higher than the accumulation base. So actually really relevant to think about usage and adoption, and maybe something to weave in future where you can, Oliver.
Yeah, really interesting.
That comes back to Kevin's point earlier, which is actually there's a lot of, I mean, presume the numbers are much bigger, but the interest in your pension becomes higher and higher the older you get. So there seems to be space in that pre-retirement at retirement market. So that's exactly what Kevin was saying, I think. So yeah, all good. Are there any other questions? Kevin, you raised your hand. Yep, go on.
I was just saying on that, I mean, it's obviously, or thinking on that, it's obviously really good that you get interaction. That's obviously the first goal that you're aiming for, to interact with certain helpful features and so forth. But what's a lot more kind of pertinent really is how many people, then complete that interaction towards an end goal. If they don't get to the end goal, then it's of no real use to them at all if it's too complex, to basically be able to use on their own. So yes, I suppose one of the kind of points back to Oliver would be, to understand, if people do offer innovative tools and so forth, how many people start those journeys, how many people end them to effectively get the, the most kind of benefit from them.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting question. It's sort of slightly separate to this radar report, which is just looking at how the market's moving. But one of the other pieces of work that we do is work with organizations to effectively test those different digital journeys, and then cross-reference that against the competitive landscape. So let's say Mike at L&G wanted to know, okay, well, what are Standard Life, Scottish Widows, and Aviva doing when it comes to encouraging conversion of a particular journey or enabling users to model their pensions at retirement? We conduct research on those particular journeys to understand, okay, like what does the journey actually look like? What are the key themes observed, like from our experts in that space around what is good user experience, and then how are consumers perceiving it? So I don't have any stats to hand, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a really interesting space, and it's all about that kind of conversion statistics and engagement statistics.
Yeah, it is. Mike, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, a little build for Oliver there, and this is the piece where we measure sort of journey completion, journey conversion. Back to that earlier point around regulation, really important with consumer duty now that as a provider, you can evidence what are my conversion rates. And sometimes you're looking for good drop-offs as well. So are your risk warnings actually effective, and making someone realise that maybe making a massive withdrawal from my drawdown pot isn't a great idea. So understanding that and then being able to benchmark it's sort of mega useful, mega important, both in terms of improving your proposition and being able to meet those regulatory needs.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Okay, we're nearly at the hour stage. If there are no other questions, I'll take this opportunity to thank you, Oliver, for your fantastic presentation. And I'm sure everyone would like to give Oliver a hand of clapping, virtual, digital clap for a great presentation. And Oliver, are those slides available? Can I, if anybody wants them, can I send them out? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. I'll ping them on to you. And thanks again for your feedback. As I touched on earlier, this is sort of an ever-evolving, learning, growing thing for us. So super helpful feedback that will play into next half-year report, which we'll certainly share with you and hopefully implement some of these changes. So yeah, much appreciative of your time today, everyone.
No, thank you very much indeed. And, we hope everybody has enjoyed the session. The video will be up later. The podcast, hey, we've got a podcast now. Will be up later as well, so you can listen back in the gym. He's still here. And then we're delighted with your presentation. It's fantastic, and good luck with it, Oliver. It sounds really good, and we should do it again. When you've got some more statistics and H2's out, we should do it again. So that'd be really cool. But thank you very much indeed for your time. And hopefully everybody can join us next week for our next exciting coffee morning. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day and just enjoy the rest of your week. And let's pray for peace in the East. So see you later, guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone. Cheers.
Cheers, Oliver. Bye. Bye.